Hello and welcome back to Automotive Tales. On today's episode, I'm going to give you an update on the 944. And here she is, the lovely 944. So she's a 2.7 manual on an F plate, and she's now in relatively fine fettle, mechanically speaking. So the car has been sat in this garage now for the best part of a year, which makes me slightly sad, and I can't believe it's been a year since I've properly driven it. Anywho, the reason it has been here is there's been some mechanical things that needed addressing. So you will have seen in previous videos, we have done a lot of work on brake lines. So we placed a whole lot of brake lines up front here. We also had a specialist do the engine mounts, because the engine mount on the driver's side is right down here in between. You can just see the exhaust there, and you've got the steering column coming down as well, and a load of other bits and pieces going on this side, which just makes this engine mount an absolute nightmare without a proper set of lifts, and having done it a few times in the past. So new engine mounts are on, which would make the gear change a little bit better because the whole transmission would just move a little bit with the old mounts. It's actually got 944 turbo mounts on, which are the only ones you can get now for the 944. It's only things Porsche will supply because they were an uprated mount. The standard mounts weren't particularly good and they failed far too often. So it's an upgrade, but it's kind of like a forced upgrade because that's all you can get. So we've done all this mechanical work. Why is it still sitting here? Well, the car is due to go into Barkston, which is a bodywork shop, and they are going to do all the bodywork the car needs. Now, initial inspection, you'd say, oh, it looks pretty good. It's all nice and clean under here. No massive rust to speak of. I mentioned in previous videos that it had the sills done by the previous owner, so it should be good to go. However, while we've been going through the mechanicals, we have uncovered some gremlins. So the body shop has asked to see what state the car is in to get a rough idea of how long it's going to be with them and how much work it's going to need doing. So they've asked me to record some footage. So it makes sense for me to, use that to share on YouTube, doubling up on content and all that jazz. So you're going to follow me around the car today as I'm going to go through objectively all the things that I think need doing. And then the body shop can assess it and let us know how long it's going to take. And then hopefully in a couple of weeks' time, be going on a trailer off to them over in Kettering direction. And they're going to try and make this look like the car it should look. Like it looks here on the camera when you can't see the crusty bits. So, let's go and have a look around. First things first, we're going to talk front wings. So, I'm sure you can straight away see the problem here. There is a hole right through this wing. It's clearly got a rather thick layer of filler on here. This has obviously been patched in the past. And I think I know why. These wings are incredibly hard to get hold of. So somebody's patched it up but not done a very good job of putting under seal on it, and it's just rotted through from behind. So I suspect this is going to need cutting out and possibly some new metal into here. And you can see along this bottom seam, it's all going there as well. It's pretty horrible. And it's all, the filler is just coming away because it's rusted underneath. So that needs sorting. Now, the sills don't feel too bad, generally speaking, along here. However, these wings, I think, were done the same time as the sills. Now, while I have some photographic evidence to show how it was all done and it was done properly, I want them to check through and just make sure it is actually as solid as it proclaims to be. And actually, the seam underneath here looks like it's splitting slightly. So that all needs checking to make sure there's no gremlins hiding behind this panel. So just quickly opening the door so we can see the shut line here. Now this, as you can see, all looks pretty good. You can see there's some remnants of a little bit of filler here, but this all looks pretty sound. I'm not entirely sure how bad it will be underneath, but so far so good. Now, let's have a look down here. A little bit similar to the wings at the front. You can see that there's a little bit of staining down here. There's obviously a bit of corrosion coming through here, but that doesn't look too major. Just check that's not too bad. It maybe needs taking back and a bit of rust proofing applied and maybe a bit of paint on there. Now, let's go have a look back there if I can get in. So I've had to be a bit of a contortionist to get into here, but what you can see at the bottom here is it's what's called the toast rack. So this is a plastic trim that sits around the bottom of the car at the back, and you can just about see it's coming away from the bodywork over here, and that's because the lower end of this panel, where the plastic is covering, appears to have rotted out. Now, I can't really get in much further, but
I think that tells you everything you need to know, is the bottom of this rear corner is pretty shot. And it looks like it's been repaired once before, but not very well. So hopefully we can do a better job of that this time. Generally speaking, around the back here, you can see the toast rack I spoke of. All looks pretty much okay, although I wouldn't be surprised to learn if there's more rust hiding behind that, because as we get round this side of the car, you can see, sorry, get the light in the right place, the toast rack is sitting a lot tighter, but it looks like there's some corrosion if we get closely in there, in the same spot, again at the bottom quarter. And as you start to get into the arch, you can see the same problem as the other side. It's just rotting away down there, so all that needs addressing. So generally speaking, the arch looks okay, although there is a little spot of rust coming here, so I'm not quite sure what that's all about. I think it's just a stone chip, because everything under here looks pretty good. And we're going to skim down to the front of the wheel arch here. So unlike the other side, this all feels pretty solid and tight, so I think this is okay. Continuing back up the driver's side, again with the door shuts open, you can see it all looks pretty good here. This isn't any sort of rust coming through, that's just filth, because the car's been clean for ages. Generally speaking, all looks pretty good here. The sill looks pretty solid. The seam underneath doesn't feel too bad, but I can't really get under to have a look. Closer inspection under here, I realised I can use the camera to look underneath the car, and that seam doesn't look terrible. It also doesn't look great though, so I'm not sure whether the body shop are going to want to have a bit of a go at that, because I don't know how deep that rust goes. There's a few bits of it sort of separating the seam there, which doesn't look great, and actually the very back end of the sill here, something looks a little bit interesting. Although it feels pretty solid, it does look a little bit flaky, so that might just be a case of a bit of a clean up and a decent bit of under seal. All feels pretty solid down here. And this is the front of the sill on the driver's side, so a similar story here. All looks relatively solid, to be honest. There's a little bit of surface corrosion there, which a bit of under seal might deal with, but as we get to the bottom of the wing, we can see a familiar problem. So it's all just bubbling up behind the filler here, so I don't trust this area here. Feels like it might be a little bit crusty, and I wonder whether this is where the new sill was put in before, and it's all got in from the front here behind the driver's wheel, and it's starting to rot the front end of that sill already. And then we get to the bottom of the wing. Now the wing on the driver's side is nowhere near as bad. There's plenty of bubbling going on here, so it definitely looks like this was a patch of new steel with a bit of filler over it, and it doesn't look like it's fared too well, although this is nowhere near as bad as the driver's side. Jacking point there doesn't look too terrible. Maybe a bit of a tidy up, and then onto the front arch, which again looks quite clean. There is a little bit of corrosion coming right at the very front here. So, I mean, ideally I'd like to avoid replacing the wings, because, my God, they are expensive. So it might be a case of a bit more fresh metal just in that corner and around into the arch here, just to tidy all of that up. So back on the passenger side, you can see just how bad the bottom of that front wing is. So as we move along the sill, it all looks okay, but not the neatest job, to be entirely honest. And actually, there's corrosion hiding behind some of this. We could be in for all sorts of trouble. And you can see then, in front of the rear wheel here, again, it looks like it's been repaired very badly in the past. And I suspect this is a source of some of our problems. Which leads me to something else you may have spotted. As I was going down the passenger side of the car, you might spot the battery is sitting down there. Now, if I zoom in on that, you might also spot some discoloration. And that is the last piece of the puzzle, I hope.
Right, so we are looking in the boot of the 944, which you may notice some jump leads. I made the massive mistake of taking the battery out and then closing the boot. And this is a servo-actuated lock. That was fun. So the reason I've had to employ some jump leads onto these terminals is because this battery tray is shot, and I've had to take the battery out. Now you can see there's a threaded hole here, and I had a slightly bigger battery in, which was into this spot where there should be another threaded hole. That is the remains of a bolt that was cut out. Still has a little rubber grommet on it.
because it was completely rotten. In fact, you can see all the shards of cut metal there from where I had to drill it out. Now, I suspect what we were seeing on the outside here with the corrosion down the bottom has meant that there's a hole through and lots of water and moisture has been gathering back here. And I dare say for my sins, I did use this car right the way through winter because I wanted to drive it. And this has cost me dearly. So this battery tray is completely shot. So, Barkston Refinishing, this is going to be a fun job for you. Sorry. So, top tip, if you need to take the battery off your 944 for any period of time and you don't want to leave the boot open. So, set jump leads onto the terminals. This won't be a problem that the terminals are exposed because you've got no power on the vehicle. Run those up and through into the front, sit them in the footwell. You can then close and lock the door. And when you want to come and open the car up again, you put a battery in the footwell, put these other end of these jump leads onto your battery, and you will be able to open the boot and install your battery properly.